So, guess the joke's on me. It's the first day in about a month and a half that there's absolutely no wind. And here I am outside in my backyard getting ready to repair my destroyed ARWing Pro, which I took out last week when it was really windy to try to do a maiden. And it worked until it crashed. So let's just take a look at some of the damage here. We have a piece of foam missing from there that's going to need to be put back in. It's cracked along here. This whole part of the top of the fuselage split from the bottom part of the fuselage, so I need to glue that back in place. It's cracked here, so I'll need to fix that. There is a crack in there, so I will need to fix that. The chunk missing from the bottom will need to be replaced. And over here on the side, the bulkhead is also split pretty severely right through. It's just split from the top half from the bottom. So I'm going to have to put that back into place and glue it in. So overall, I believe it's going to be recoverable. It's just going to take a little bit of work and some of our good friend here, E6000. So I'm not sure if it's going to be very easy for me to film doing all of the gluing in that, so I probably won't, but at least you'll get a sense of what I've needed to do. If there's something particularly interesting or tricky, maybe I'll take some photo of it, but overall it's just mostly going to be reattaching everything, making sure that it's straight and that the seams are sealed properly. We can make it work. Let's crack out some glue and try not to get too high. So I guess to start with, what I'm going to do is show you the things that I'm using to actually do the repairs and kind of maybe give you some ideas about what things you could use. If you crash and you have to do a repair, your damage is going to be different than mine. But some of these things will at least give you a good idea of how you can go about doing some of the repairs and some of the things you're going to want to do, and perhaps some of the things you're going to want to avoid. If you take a look right here, I've got a few sort of pointy cutty objects here. It's just what I call a bodkin. It's just a long needle that I can use for picking things out. I had a few pieces of wood that were actually embedded in a little deeply in the foam, and so using the pin here and a pair of tweezers, I was able to do a little bit of cleaning out. And the same with a blade like this. It's just to clean out damage, to smooth things over. Just as an example here, you can see on the model here, for me this is a very rough area, and when I'm doing the repair, I'm just going to need to take the X-Acto blade here and just level it out a little bit, so that when I go back to put the pieces in place, they meet up properly. This is not really intended for going and cutting things straight. You don't really want to do that. You're going to want to keep the foam as close to the shape that you found it in, because it will fit back in more accurately that way and fit very well. As for glue, you should be using E6000. It's flat out going to be the best choice to do this. There is another product out there called Goop, which would be similar, but it's a different kind of glue. It will work and it won't damage the foam, so you could use that, but this clear transparent E6000 is really what you're going to want to use. Do not use hot glue. Do not use crazy glue. Crazy glue will just melt the foam, and hot glue, well, it's hot. It will melt the glue, and it's actually fairly brittle and doesn't do the job right. Now, along with that, you're going to want to have paper towels, not toothpicks for doing this. You're going to want something that's a little bit longer as a skewer. If you're trying to deal with stuff in here with little toothpicks, you're just going to get it all over your hand, and it's just going to be a mess working with the E6000. You're also going to want to have a little place like this, so you can take your really goopy skewers when you're halfway through what you're doing and be able to put them down so that the excess glue will drip off while you are you know, trying to put the piece of foam back in place that you just applied the glue to, you're going to want to have a place to put that to drip off. Once you get into the process of actually doing the gluing and putting the pieces back in place, or in my case I had to re-glue the actual physical top half of the fuselage back to the bottom half. It just split cleanly right down the middle. You need something to hold it in place. You're going to need to be able to, in a sense, clamp it and hold that in place as you're doing the repair. The glue is not an instant set. It sets moderately quickly, but it doesn't just grab and then hold in that place. If you let it go, it will slowly loosen, and so you need to be able to hold it in place. And there are a bunch of different ways that you can do it. The thing that you can see as I switch over here to the other camera again, you can see that I've got a lot of tape on this one. And that's because for me, based on the kind of damage that I had, using this tape, which is painter's tape, okay, was a really good way to do this. Now this is what is called painter's tape. It is a very low tack tape, which means it doesn't stick really hard, and so it actually peels off, as you can see I'm doing right here, peels off very easily and does not leave much behind on the tape, and you can see it doesn't leave much behind on the foam at all either, but it sticks really well and holds in place. So depending on the kind of damage, if you're just looking to perhaps, you know, take two things and hold them like that, wrapping tape over it this way will do that. And so that's what I've done in a lot of places through here. I've just used tape to take from the top to the bottom and squeeze them together and hold them in place. Alternatively, and I needed to do this, what I'm going to talk about next, I needed to do it on the front here, and if you look right here, you can see a little after effect of the repair. And that's because what I needed to do was, in order to get rid of, this got compressed, and in order to get rid of the compression, I needed to use some clamps to flatten things out. This is foam. These are clamps. They will absolutely completely crush the foam. Just started by gluing the balsa back together that had cracked in the nose cone, at least the parts that I could find, and then we'll go from there. Once that sets, at least the bottom half of it will be rigid again, and then I can start reattaching the top in its various pieces. So what I have to do is replace the balsa wood, except in this case it's not balsa now, it's a piece of pine from a wooden ruler that I had kicking around that actually is just by chance exactly the right width, and it fits in there just perfectly after I, you know, cut it properly to the right shape. But in my case, because of the damage that happened, there's a nice big gap here between the wood and the foam now, because things kind of got compressed and the shape changed. And so what I'm going to have to do is, along with the E6000, I'm going to have to use a pretty heavy-duty clamp on there to get that together. But of course, this open cell foam and a heavy clamp like this don't really go along together so well. The clamp will crush this foam. And so what I've also got is a piece of, for lack of a better term, sacrificial foam here. This is closed cell foam, and it's really dense. It's the stuff that our electronics typically comes packaged in. And so what I'll do is I'll place it on the bottom here, and so when the clamp is on, which I can't really do very well with only one hand here doing it, it's going to clamp on the wood and it's going to clamp on this foam, and so any damage that the clamp might do will be done to this foam and not actually the model, and it will just distribute that and put the pressure all the way up so that those will meet better. So you can see how much, pardon me, the clamp is actually crushing this foam, and that's why it's called sacrificial foam. It's taking all the damage, and it's still putting a lot of force up through there, and the other part of the clamp is on the wood, so it's doing no damage to the foam too, and you get a very tight clamp. And you can see now that it's all meshed up and that E6000 is having a proper chance to do what it needs to do. The other thing that you can also use are, and I'm going to try to get a nice picture of it here. Let's see if I can zoom in on that a little bit better. What are called straight pins. And it's just a pin that people would use typically with sewing to hold fabric in place when they're sewing. But in this case, for example, I have a piece that I need to replace back here in the nose cone, and in this area here it's going to be a little hard for me to wrap tape around. I certainly couldn't use a clamp in there, but what I can do is I can take a pin and push it through the foam like that. And the pin has such a tiny diameter that even though it's going to get exposed to the glue in here and maybe a little glue will stick on it, it will still just pull out very easily once it's all set. So in terms of holding things in place, painter's tape is an awesome choice. Don't use other kinds. Don't use duct tape or anything like that. It will stick way too hard. Use painter's tape. You can get it at any hardware store. You can use little tiny clamps like these very gently in specific situations. And pins. They will help you a lot. So using those 3, 4, 5, whatever, using all of these things, you should be able to find how you can use them in different places to, do the repairs that you need to be able to do. So just as another example, today you can see I've already done a bunch of the repairs here. What I'm going to be doing next is removing the tape on here and checking that those repairs that I did yesterday are in fact good, and they actually look to be very, very good. If you come in here, I'll try to zoom in on that a little bit. That area was, in here is the bottom half of the fuselage and the top half of the fuselage. That was split completely in half, and now you can't see that there's any problem there whatsoever. And the same thing here. I'll just pull off this. Well, let's zoom out again so it's clear. You can see how this tape really doesn't stick. This is hard to do with one hand. There we are. Stick very hard. And it just pulls off here mostly. It's too hard for me to do with one hand. Here we are. There we go. And you can see it just pulls off. There's no residue of the tape left on there whatsoever. There we go. And as we zoom out here just a little bit, you can see there, no damage, or at least it doesn't really look so bad. That was cut right in half. If we spin around through here, it was split all the way through. This was completely cracked in half. You could separate the whole part completely, and it's completely solid now. Back together like it was almost never damaged. Not quite. So that's the general process. And it's a bit of a trick for me to try to actually film me doing all of the actual gluing and steps like that, but I hope this gives you a pretty clear idea of what you can do and how to do it. Should you ever need to, which I hope you never do, this will help you out with putting back together a model that you accidentally broke. Anyways, thanks very much for watching. I do hope that this helps, and I appreciate the comments and feedback that you guys all give. So until next time, take care and have fun flying.